Hello, friends. Greetings from California. We're surrounded by smoke and the smell of the fires. So far, we haven't been evacuated. We hope we'll be able to continue with our activities here. We're dealing with the question of the essential verities last week and had some quotations that begin to establish the very deepest lines of recognition of the position of Baha'u'llah in this case. And Shoghi Effendi selected these quotations about this day, the importance of this day. He's done that here in the dispensation, but he also has done it in the Advent of Divine Justice. He's added a whole large collection of quotations there in the very last part of the Advent of Divine Justice, which we want to bear in mind when looking at these quotations, which characterize the time we're in and the station of Baha'u'llah with relation to other religions and also in general for the conditions of mankind. Last week we heard some of the very challenging quotations, Baha'u'llah, about his station and the station of his day, and the fact that if it weren't for him, no manifestations of God would have appeared in the past. And that's because they're preliminary. They were announcers. They were prophets prophesying the day of God, or in our terminology, this Baha'i cycle. We had the Adamic cycle and now the Baha'i cycle, two different prophetic cycles. And I noticed this week reviewing something of from Baha'i Administration of the Guardian, where he presents the features, the distinguishing features of Abdul Baha's noble presentation of the cause. Very interesting subject. Let's see where I can bring that up for you.
Green.
Yeah. Distinguishing features, here we go. All right, I hope you can see that. So this is a sheet that breaks down the paragraph from the Guardian's, one of the Guardian's letters in Baha'i Administration in his early letters to the West. Now, these are the distinguishing features of Abdul Baha's noble presentation of the cause. We'll come back just after this to a question of Abdul Baha's method in the West for teaching the cause. But Shoghi Effendi is pressed here to tell us that we should bear in mind the example which our beloved master has clearly set before us. And then he outlines a number of factors related to Abdul Baha's presentation. He was wise and tactful in his approach, wakeful and attentive in his early intercourse, broad and liberal in all his public utterances, cautious and gradual in the unfolding of the essential verities of the cause. Now, that was the reason that I brought this up, and I wanted to introduce it here today with respect to what we were talking about, these essential verities that we've been reviewing from the dispensation. To go on, he was passionate in his appeal, yet sober in argument. He was confident in tone, unswerving in conviction, dignified in his manners. Such were the distinguishing features of our beloved's noble presentation of the cause of Baha'u'llah. Now, why would he be cautious and gradual in the unfolding of the essential verities of the cause? It seems to me, reflecting on the quotes that we've been looking at, that the very central, exalted position of Baha'u'llah with respect to his station, with respect to the past dispensations, where he fits into it, are very challenging, and they need to be introduced cautiously and gradually. Now, we're studying them because we want to enhance our penetration and understanding of the meaning of the cause. So we need to know about these things, and they inform us. Their spirit prevails, and we may then make simple pronouncements about the Baha'i teachings and about the role of the manifestation. And because we are grounded in this conviction of the various eternal verities that we've been studying, our words penetrate the hearts of the listeners, those that are able to be penetrated. This reminded me of some experiences in the past. I had the honor of traveling with the Hand of the Cause of God, Inokolinga, in South America for some 3 months back in the 70s, early 70s. And in the course of his travels, because there were lots of opportunities, I was translating all of the, he didn't know Spanish, and was translating particulars and translating individual conversations and translating on the spot his talks, his public talks, his firesides, proclamation of the faith on the radio, all the other things. And I had met him previously in Panama in 1961 when he represented the Hands of the Cause in the Holy Land at the establishment of the National Spiritual Assembly of Panama. The hands had spread out around the world, and they were convoking the various conventions which elected those national assemblies, which 2 years later were to vote and establish the first Universal House of Justice. I remember we were helping Mr. Olinga just see a few of the sites. We took him to the Panama Canal, and he was surveying the canal, but at the same time, he was talking to us about his pilgrimage experience with Shoghi Effendi, of course, some years before. And these experiences were after he was a Knight of Baha'u'llah, but before he was named a Hand of the Cause of God. He spoke so beautifully about that. And now on this trip, I was able to ask him more questions about it and elicit more understanding of what he was doing. He had been in Cameroon teaching the cause of God and opened British Cameroon. He opened it to the faith. It was a virgin goal. He was the Knight of Baha'u'llah. He had some African colleagues with him that came from Uganda also, and they opened the neighboring countries, and they became Knights of Baha'u'llah. His teaching work was very intense and quite successful. In the first year, he had 100 enrollments. This prompted the Guardian to give him a title. The title was Abu Futu, the Father of Victories. So he's already had this accolade from Shoghi Effendi when he went on pilgrimage. Still quite young, and as I say, a Knight of Baha'u'llah, but that was the activity that he had when he went to the Holy Land. When he got to the Holy Land, the Guardian welcomed him and had him take residence up in the Eastern Pilgrim House rather than the Western Pilgrim House. Now, the difference in that was that the Eastern men who were up at the Pilgrim House near the shrine on the mountain, near the shrine of the Bab, they had the bounty of receiving a visit from Shoghi Effendi in the afternoon. He accompanied them to the shrines and he chanted the visitation there with them and spoke to them in the gardens, walking back and forth in the gardens. So that was a beautiful experience. And Shoghi Effendi put him there. There were no Eastern pilgrims at the time. And he assigned Lotfullah Hakim to cook for him, prepare meals, and be with him. That's the same Lotfullah Hakim who was elected to the first Universal House of Justice and was the Eastern Secretary of Shoghi Effendi for Persian correspondence. Shoghi Effendi said that then the guardian came and he walked with him in the gardens and he visited the shrines. And among the things that the guardian emphasized with him was the example of the master, his teachings, the style of his teaching, the manner of his presentation. And he commended to Inakolinga that he mastered the details of Abdul Baha's talks to the West, that there was no way to better the presentation of the cause. Now, friends, we sometimes wonder how to teach the cause. What should we be teaching? All of these talks, Abdul Baha said, address some of the same shortcomings and difficulties, the materialistic tendencies of the country we live in, the atheism, the prejudice amongst the religions. And all of these things are addressed in the discourse of Abdul Baha. Very helpful is to gather and organize the quotations from the talks of Abdul Baha and some of his tablets also in the West about the presentation of the teachings. Some talks he never got to mentioning the name of Baha'u'llah. But of course, he being the mirror of the covenant was the mirror of the light of Baha'u'llah. And so he was again cautious sometimes in presenting the full picture. He would say that the sun of truth has risen in the east and its light is irradiating the whole world. Now, Mr. Olinga took this very seriously. It's hard to know. It seemed to me, and some of the other counselors had the same feeling hearing his talks, that he'd memorized talks of the master and he gave those talks. That would have been fine. But a couple of times I took notes of public talks that he gave. One particularly in Oruro in the Bolivian high plateau. We were up nearly 3,500 meters, nearly 4,000 meters. We had been even higher in the mountains and slept in a native dwelling where Mr. Ling had spoken to Quechua, many of the Quechuan friends who gathered in the mountains there. Then we took a truck down, that is a truck filled with coca leaves and chickens and other things. We balanced somehow on the top of this truck and arrived at the door of the University of Oruro, where Mr. Olinga was scheduled to give a talk to the university student body. When we arrived, first the rector of the university was there to help us down off the top of this truck. And we were covered with dust and kind of brushed us off and told us that the audience was in place and the talk was going to be broadcast nationally on national radio, and that they were waiting for us, and that your subject is the relationship of science and religion. All right. We walked in, there was no chance for a prayer or anything. We were on the air. Suddenly we were on the air. And we gave a lecture, 45 minutes to an hour, I think it was. And I took some notes of this and I looked for this because it was so like the master's talks that I thought maybe he has memorized it. But I could never find it. It's just that he'd so absorbed the spirit of the way Abdu'l-Baha would deliver himself to the public, that was a close match and mirror of the master's method that the Guardian had commended to him. Now, in reinforcement of that, I wanted to read to you a couple of letters of Shoghi Effendi that have been published. The first one is to an individual believer in 1943 in the West. He says that the cause has the remedy for all the world's ills. The reason why more people don't accept it is because the Baha'is are not always capable of presenting it to them in a way that meets the immediate needs of their minds. Young Baha'is like yourself must prepare themselves to really bring the message to their generation, who need it so desperately and who can understand the language it speaks so well. He would advise you, among other books, to study the talks of Abdu'l-Baha, as his method of approaching the mind of the public cannot be surpassed. He also advises you to develop yourself as a public speaker, so you will be increasingly able to teach the cause. Several prerequisites here for arising to teach the cause, which of course we're involved in both as an individual responsibility all the time, and then in the various phases of our collective activities, in the phases of growth and so on that we're involved in. The next letter is a translation from the Persian, and it was addressed to the local assemblies of the East. The Baha'i youth must be taught how to teach the cause of God. Teaching the cause of God needs to be taught. Now, one of the books we have in this sequence deals directly with the quotations related to teaching, and important to deepen in those, understand those, and search them out in the rest of the writings. Their knowledge of the fundamentals of the faith must be deepened, and the standard of their education in science and literature enhanced. They must become thoroughly familiar with the language used and the example set by Abdu'l-Baha in his public addresses throughout the West. They must also be acquainted with those essential prerequisites of teaching as recorded in the holy books and tablets. So friends, this gives us a good example. Maybe we'll send some of us back to analyzing the discourse of Abdu'l-Baha to see how he addressed certain subjects, how he brought the public forward, and how he exercised all these examples that we saw in the first quotation. Again, wise and tactful in approach, wakeful and attentive in his early intercourse, broad and liberal in his public utterances, cautious and gradual in the unfolding of the essential verities of the cause. Passionate in his appeal, confident in tone, unswerving in conviction, and always very dignified in his manners. Mr. Olinga was very loving and intimate in gatherings with the youth and the friends, believers of the faith during these travels in South America. And he spoke with such wisdom. I've never seen anybody speak with the wisdom he spoke with. And of course, that's because I think he was mirroring Abdu'l-Baha's approach so beautifully. Well, when he went on a platform, public platform, I witnessed this several times. Afterwards, people would say, "Is he a king? Who is he?" He was so dignified, calm, assured, confident, and dignified in his presentation, and no hesitations. He didn't have any notes or anything. It came out. Really, he's an extraordinary example of the power of teaching of the Western hands that I know. I don't know all the details of the Eastern hands. I had a lot of association with the Western hands, and they were all inspiring. But Mr. Olenga had a special knack for addressing the public and also for addressing the believers and drawing them into the desire for new levels of consciousness in their interaction with the teachings and the tablets and all the proclamation of the cause. All right, we go back to our questions we were dealing with last week. Let's see here. No,
Double click.
that's not it. Let's see, where are we here?
That's it.
We don't want that to finish with that. Where are these essential verities? There they are.
No, double click. Double click here.
No, so where's the essential verities? Are here, you know? Where are they? They're here.
It's this one. Double click that one. That one. There.
Okay. So now we're down to what we were looking at last week. And I wanted to move forward after those introductory things to the quotation. This is number 8. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One of the challenging matters that Baha'u'llah brings up here, he proclaims the voice of the Son of Man is calling aloud from the sacred veil, here am I, O God, my God. And then the voice from the burning bush. And then he pronounces, the Father has come. That which you were promised in the kingdom of God is fulfilled. This is the word which the Son veiled when he said to those around him that at that time they could not bear it. Verily, the Spirit of truth is come to guide you unto all truth. He is the one who glorified the Son and exalted his cause, which of course are also prophetic statements from the New Testament. Now, this is worthy of clarification because the term Father alternates in these quotations between Father, the essence of God, who Christ refers to as the Father, and the station of Christ returning in the glory of his Father, which in this case, Shoghi Effendi connects with the quotation in the Old Testament about the everlasting Father. And we need to distinguish between these two if we're teaching this subject, or if we're deepening in it, we also want to look for it. First of all, we have a letter from the Guardian in 1951. He says, concerning your questions, when Christ prayed, our Father who art in heaven, he referred to God, not to Baha'u'llah. Important to understand. And then another one in 1954, he says, in accepting Baha'u'llah, you have accepted Christ in his appearance as the Father, as he himself so clearly foretold. So this is a reference now to the biblical reference of the everlasting Father found in Isaiah 9:6, where it says, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. God passes by, Shoghi Effendi says, to Israel, Baha'u'llah, Baha'u'llah, was neither more nor less than the incarnation of the everlasting Father, the Lord of hosts, come down with 10,000s of saints. God passes by, page 94. The word which the Son concealed is made manifest. He hath been sent down in the form of a human temple in this day. Blessed be the Lord, who is the Father. He verily is come unto the nations in his most great majesty. This is the day whereon the rock, in other words, Peter, crieth out and shouteth and celebrateth the praise of its Lord, the all-possessing, the Most High, saying, Lo, the Father is come, and that which ye were promised in the kingdom is fulfilled. Now, quotation where that comes from. Where I gave you the source of that before. I think that's from a tablet to the Pope, which is cited in Promised Days Come on page 31. Now we come to another letter written by the Guardian to a Christian believer in Europe, I think obviously of Catholic background. Now, as regards the signs that would herald the advent of the new manifestation. Now, obviously, this lady is written and saying there's so many prophecies in the New Testament are not fulfilled. Baha'u'llah has come and those prophecies haven't been fulfilled. How do we understand this? The Guardian wishes you to read over very carefully Baha'u'llah's explanation as recorded in the Igan. There it is made clear that what is meant by the appearance of the Son of God after the calamitous events preceding his coming is the revelation of his full glory and its recognition and acceptance by the peoples of the world, not his physical appearance. For Baha'u'llah, whose advent marks the return of the Son in the glory of the Father, has already appeared, and the signs predicted in the gospel have not yet fully been realized. Their complete fulfillment, however, would mark the beginning of the recognition of his full station by the peoples of the world. Then and only then will his appearance be made completely manifest. So have his physical appearance and then the appearance of his spiritual stature and greatness, which is still ahead of us. And in that sense, all eyes shall see him becomes fulfilled in that sense, that because all eyes will recognize him, or a great majority of the people will recognize him. This in a letter published, and it's the date on it is 29 November 1937. It's very interesting for those of you who are maybe talking to friends and acquaintances about Baha'u'llah's relationship to Christianity and the importance of Christianity and the coming of Baha'u'llah the coming of Christ with a new name. We'll be interested in following through with this quotation. Now, we had gotten through a few of the other quotations in the meanwhile. There's a letter of Shoghi Effendi. He says, this is dated 22 June 1943. In the Baha'i teachings, it states that all the prophets have foretold a promised one, who is Baha'u'llah. We cannot be sure of the authenticity word for word of any of the past holy scriptures except the Quran, as they were either not written down during the prophet's lifetime or have been changed in the course of time and the originals lost. What we can be sure of is that when the master stated that Zoroaster foretold a promised one's coming, it is correct. The Zoroastrians have no way of contradicting this assertion of ours, as they themselves know their scriptures are not in the original form, and therefore not absolutely authentic. Now we need to move on with the quotations that we were looking at. In this case now, the question of the Comforter, whose advent all the scriptures have promised, is now come, that he may reveal unto you all knowledge and wisdom. Seek him over the entire surface of the earth. Haply ye may find him. Now this is, grounded in the New Testament, looking forward to the coming of the Comforter. In the original language, it's cognate, the term Ahmad, which is also the root of Muhammad, and therefore relates this particular comment to the coming of Muhammad. But the Comforter also, in a sense that all of the prophets then are the return of the former ones. We see it related to the Baha'i teachings as well. Shoghi Effendi says in God Passes By, page 95, that Jesus Christ had referred to Baha'u'llah as the Comforter. And then the biblical quotations are in John chapter 14 and 15. You can find references there too. I will pray the Father, he shall give you another Comforter, that he may abide with you forever, even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it seeth him not, neither knoweth him. But ye know him, for he dwelleth with you and shall be in you. But the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I have said unto you. And again, but when the Comforter is come, whom I will send unto you from the Father, even the Spirit of truth, which proceedeth from the Father, he shall testify of me. So these prophecies, they extend forward, as I understand, they extend forward to Islam and then also to the Bab and Baha'u'llah. Now Shoghi Effendi quotes a passage from the Tablet of Carmel. Call out to Zion, O Carmel, and announce the joyful tidings. He that was hidden from mortal eyes is come. His all-conquering sovereignty is manifest. His all-encompassing splendor is revealed. Hasten forth and circumambulate the city of God that hath descended from heaven, the celestial Kaaba, round which have circled in adoration the favorite of God, the pure in heart, and the company of the most exalted angels. City of God, you'll recall from the Igan, is an example of the revelation of God. The city of God is the revelation itself. So hasten forth and circumambulate the city of God that hath descended. The hand of the cause, Jalal Qazi, was assigned to South America, and I had the privilege of serving as a board member and then an executive board member under him while I was in South America until the Board of Counselors was appointed. And Mr. Qazi told some stories about his pilgrimage to me, which were very precious. He said, I had heard before I went to the Holy Land on pilgrimage, my request had been accepted by the Guardian, and he traveled with Mr. Khadim. But were not hands of the cause yet at that time, but eventually they became appointed and then served the faith as hands of the cause later on. The rumor was there, or the understanding was there, that if you go to the Holy Land when you're in the presence of the guardian, he knows what you're thinking. Mr. Causey was a little alarmed by that, and he said, I thought perhaps maybe it's not a good idea for me to go, because I can't tell what's going to jump in my mind at any time, and if he understands it. And I said, well, he doesn't make it obvious, but we understand that he understands. Finally, he decided, okay, I'll take the chance. I want to go on pilgrimage. I want to visit the shrines. And he went, and he was with Mr. Cawdin. And he said the first day that the guardian took them to the shrine of the Bab, the guardian used to take the pilgrims to the shrine of the Bab one day and to the shrine of Abdu'l-Baha the next. He didn't visit both shrines usually on a visit, unless it was a holy day. So he said, we went into the shrine, and the guardian, we stood at the back, one on each side at the back of the shrine. And the guardian went forward to the threshold and to the tablet, and he himself chanted the visitation for us. What a heavenly moment that must be. And of course, they were deeply impressed. They just met Shoghi Effendi now. Mr. Causey had not known him previously. Mr. Cawdin had been there on previous pilgrimages, so he had more idea. And then he said that the guardian, after he prayed, he prostrated himself at the threshold. Then he got up and he started backing out towards the door to come out of the shrine. And the two of them were on either side. So they looked at each other like, what do we do? You know, this is the sign of God on earth. We should face him, or should we face the shrine? And we both looked like we didn't know what to do. Mr. Causey said, I am portly. So he said, I kind of half-halved it, half to the guardian and half to the threshold. Then the guardian passed out. Then we went forward to the threshold, prostrated ourselves and prayed. And then we backed out of the shrine. When we came out, Shoghi Effendi had put his shoes on and he was pacing. And as we were putting our shoes on, he said, just don't understand the station of the shrine. He said, we knew which friends he was talking about because we were right there. And he said, then he began extolling the shrine and the fact that Baha'u'llah himself had said that all the saints and holy messengers of God of the past were circling in ambulation around the shrine of the Bab. We were at the front of the shrine with a view towards Akka. And as I was hearing this, Mr. Causey said, the thought came in my head, my gracious, what's left for Baha'u'llah if everybody's here circling the Bab? This was just his own inner thoughts. He said, Shoghi Effendi stopped, turned around, faced right, looked at me, faced right to me, smiled, and he said, and then Baha'u'llah and all those that circle the Bab and all those that circle around him circle around Baji. So they immediately solved this problem, and he understood that the guardian somehow was prompted to know what you needed to hear at any given moment. Precious stories from the hands of the cause. All right. Another quotation comes up.
Shanil says the stream jammed for a few seconds while you were talking about exiting the shrine and what he said. If you could repeat that part because they missed it.
The screen, I understand the screen jammed. The friends came out of the shrine. They had been, the two gentlemen had been at the threshold. They came out and backed out. And when they came out of the shrine, Shoghi Effendi had put his shoes on and he was pacing. And he said to them that the station of the shrine is very great. And the friends don't understand the station of the shrine. And again, as I mentioned, he said that we knew which friends he was talking about. Was right there. Then he quoted from the writings about the shrine and about those that were circling around, the messengers and the saints and prophets of the past were circling around this holy shrine. And I think that maybe you've heard the rest of the story, as I understand, just a momentary blitz there. But the whole idea is that the Bab and everyone that circles around him, they also circle around Baji. Now, physically, that sounds difficult, but in the spiritual realm, it doesn't seem to be a problem. Back to these quotations that Shoghi Effendi has gathered in the dispensation. Baha'u'llah pronouncing, I am the one whom the tongue of Isaiah hath extolled, the one with whose name both the Torah and the Evangel were adorned. Again, he states, the glory of Sinai hath hastened to circle round the dayspring of this revelation, while from the heights of the kingdom, the voice of the Son of God is heard proclaiming, bestir yourselves, ye proud ones of the earth, and hasten ye towards him. This is Baha'u'llah quoting Christ from the other world to the proud ones of the earth. There's a tablet, a separate tablet. Somebody asked Baha'u'llah, when you say these things, that Solomon is circle around me in adoration and bowing down, and he says this and that. Is this metaphorical, or how is it? And Baha'u'llah on a tablet says, when I say those things, they are actually spiritual events. So this one about Christ, I think we would understand in quite the same way. Carmel hath in this day hastened in longing adoration to attain his court, whilst from the heart of Zion there cometh the cry, the promise of all ages is now fulfilled. That which had been announced in the holy writ of God, the beloved, the Most High, is made manifest. So now we've moved on. Now here's references for Muslims. Hijaz is astir by the breeze of joyful reunion. Friends, perhaps you'll remember Hijaz is the province of the Arabian Peninsula that contains the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, where the great exploits of Muhammad, the Apostle of God, took place. Praise be to thee, we hear her exclaim. O my Lord, the Most High, I was dead through my separation from thee. The breeze laden with the fragrance of thy presence hath brought me back to life. Happy is he that turneth unto thee, and woe betide the erring. By the one true God, Elijah hath hastened unto my court, and hath circumambulated in the daytime and in the night season my throne of glory. Here's another one of these images from the next world that's happening in the eternal realm. And in a sense, I think these events are ongoing. He announces them, and in with our limited understanding of time here, maybe we place them as having happened a century ago when Baha'u'llah, or more than a century ago when Baha'u'llah would have pronounced them. But I think we're talking about, there's a spiritual immediacy of all of these things, which we should perhaps read into them. Here's the one that may have prompted this question of Baha'u'llah about Solomon. Solomon in all his majesty circles in adoration around me in this day, uttering this most exalted word. I've turned my face towards thy face, O thou omnipotent ruler of the world. I'm wholly detached from all things pertaining unto me, and yearn for that which thou dost possess. I think it's clear, friends, from the writings that when we go wishing for the presence or enter the presence of God in the next world, the presence of God in the kingdom is still the presence of the manifestation. So Baha'u'llah is present in that world and in this world. Simultaneously, he's dealing with things that beyond our comprehension. So when he pronounces these things, he's together, and those spiritual realities are together with him. That would be the way I would understand it. Had Muhammad, the apostle of God, attained this day, he would have exclaimed, I have truly recognized thee, O thou, the desire of the divine messengers. Had Abraham attained it, he too, falling prostrate upon the ground in the utmost lowliness before the Lord thy God, would have cried, mine heart is filled with peace, O thou Lord of all that is in heaven and on earth. I testify that thou hast unveiled before mine eyes all the glory of thy power and the full majesty of thy law. Had Moses himself attained it, he likewise would have raised his voice, saying, all praise be to thee for having lifted up upon me the light of thy countenance, and enrolled me among them that have been privileged to behold thy face. And again, north and south both vibrate to the call announcing the advent of our revelation. We can hear the voice of Mecca acclaiming, all praise be to thee, O Lord my God, the all-glorious, for having wafted over me the breath redolent with the fragrance of thy presence. Jerusalem likewise is calling aloud, lauded and magnified art thou, O beloved of earth and heaven, for having turned the agony of my separation from thee into the joy of a life-giving reunion. And then Shoghi Effendi turns his attention to certain passages related to Baha'u'llah's allusions to the mysterious forces he has released. This subject of forces is a very important one, I think, in the writings. By the righteousness of God, should a man all alone arise in the name of Baha and put on the armor of his love, him will the Almighty cause to be victorious, though the forces of earth and heaven be arrayed against him. And again, by God, besides whom is none other God, should anyone arise for the triumph of our cause, him will God render victorious, though tens of thousands of enemies believe. And if his love for me wax stronger, God will establish his ascendancy over all the powers of earth and heaven. Thus have we breathed the spirit of power into all regions. Then Shoghi Effendi lines up a series of quotations extolling the glories of this long-awaited day, characterizing this dispensation of Baha'u'llah, this most great dispensation of all recorded religious history. This is the King of days, the day that has seen the coming of the best beloved, him who through all eternity hath been acclaimed the desire of the world. The world of being shineth in this day with the resplendency of this divine revelation. All created things extol its saving grace and sing its praises. The universe is wrapped in an ecstasy of joy and gladness. The scriptures of past dispensations celebrate the great jubilee that must needs greet this most great day of God. Well is it with him that hath lived to see this day and hath recognized its station. Now, friends, I think some immediate reaction we have is, when did all of this happen and nobody noticed and we didn't see it? That's one of the great miracles of the faith, is that these things gradually, the power of what has taken place appears to us. Baha'u'llah says if it all appeared at the very beginning, we would burn us out completely. And the other thing is, we are all veiled by our orientation to materialism, the skepticism which materialism has brought into us, doubtful of these kind of things. So our job now, and this is directly assisted by Baha'u'llah through such passages, is to awaken our higher consciousness, to draw our thoughts towards him, magnetically to be drawn to the source of these quotations. And by stages, or very quickly, depending on the nature of our relationship with Baha'u'llah and with God through Baha'u'llah, the reality of these quotations becomes apparent to us. The very fact, if they don't mean anything to us, is a good source of worry about getting busy and asking that their meaning be revealed. Baha'u'llah foresees this. He says that, well is it with him that hath recognized its station. This requires an act of recognition of the day of God. Again, were mankind to give heed in a befitting manner to no more than one word of such a praise, it would be so filled with delight as to be empowered and lost in wonder. Entranced, it would then shine forth resplendent above the horizon of true understanding. This is about all mankind. If mankind could give heed to one word of the praise that Baha'u'llah is revealing, we'd be so filled with delight. This is the promises of the golden age of the faith, as people become entranced, as they become imbued with through interaction with the revelations, through immersing themselves in the ocean of his teachings, they gradually take on the capacity to penetrate the meanings and draw the radiance and inspiration from these passages that she has said are essential, reflective of the essential verities of the cause. Be fair, ye peoples of the world. Is it meet and seemly for you to question the authority of one whose presence he who conversed with God, Moses in other words, hath longed to attain, the beauty of whose countenance God's well-beloved Muhammad had yearned to behold, through the potency of whose love the Spirit of God hath ascended to heaven, for whose sake the primal point offered up his life. Should we be questioning his authority? All right, friends, we're coming to see if there's some questions. If something of yours didn't somebody had something to ask, um, from last week. You're welcome to bring it up again.
Just 10:57. Top of Dushmar.
Friends coordinating various initiatives. Second here.
10:57. 10:57 at the top.
I'll come to the end. Is there a question here somewhere?
Scroll up, it's Dushmar.
Which document are we on today? This is
I got that one at the top. There's Dushmar's asking about the scientific, what is the scientific approach?
I don't see it, anything here of that sort.
Scroll up.
Nusrafnan, dearest Dunbar, what does it mean when we say we are scientific in our approach and method as Baha'is? Many thanks and much love. Wow, that's a good, let's address that question to everybody. You should all be thinking about that. Recently, you hear statements on the internet about people who are beginning to distinguish between the pronouncements of scientists and the science behind what they're pronouncing. We want to accept the science. Abdu'l-Baha said clearly that science and revelation are in full accord with each other. And sometimes the science states something which later through a new paradigm, it shifts. We need to follow all that, but we need to hold to the divine reality of the messages. But scientific in the sense is that we look and analyze things, we weigh things. I think this is basic to the scientific method. We want demonstrations. Abdu'l-Baha is very strong about learning the proofs for the revelation, learning the proofs for the existence of God. And this again is the example of Abdu'l-Baha in the West. He's tackled this subject in several of his gatherings, both in Europe and the United States. So we want to look for those, and in his pronouncements about the unity of science and religion, look for those things. Also, there's some important tablets about this, which we should to look at, I think, too. It says, we know this is a basic principle of our faith, and we want to be a little cautious about throwing out our knowledge of the cause and certain principles of the cause because they don't accord with the present day science. For instance, Baha'u'llah is very clear, over and over states in different ways that the universe, the realm, the created realm has had no beginning. It has a beginning which has no beginning, and if it has an end, it's an end that we can't understand or foresee. It's eternal in nature. So this raises questions about the theories presently prevailing about how the universe came into being and so on. We want to take those things with caution and try to compare and see. Now, some people are already asking the question, and it's a legitimate one. Before the Big Bang, what existed before the Big Bang? Was a question that doesn't seem to fit in with the paradigm that people are acting on now. I remember when I was in high school, with great authority, the science teacher said that this is the only star in the solar system that has planets. There's no evidence that there's planets anywhere else in the universe. Now look how far we've come since 70 years ago or 75 years ago when I was in high school. Amazing change. So weigh all things with the eye of reason. Be scientific in your approach, but beg Baha'u'llah and God for enlightenment to penetrate the realities that are being spoken of here. Well, I hope you have a wonderful week, friends. And I hope we'll be here. We're surrounded by fires and smoke and things here. We're hoping to be able to be with you again next week. Thank you.